Hello everybody, this is Yoko's Anime Reactions, and I think this was the full screen button, yep. Okay. And this is going to be part 4 of my reading of the Overlord light novels. As far as I know, I think I'm halfway through this at the moment. I could be wrong. But yeah, let's get started. I don't know how far I'm going to get, but I hope to get at least a decent way into it. I think they pronounced it Khan Village. Khan. It was a small village not far from the Tove Woodlands at the southern edge Azurlesia Mountains that formed the border between the Empire and the Kingdom. The population was about 120. 25 households was not an uncommon size for a village on the frontiers of the Riestes Kingdom. Bleh. Khan mainly relied on agriculture and the bounty of the forest, and the only visitor... Hang on. Gotta rub my eye. Only visitor apart from an apothecary who came to acquire herbs was a tax collector. The phrase, like time had stopped, was an apt description of the place. The day started early in the village. Villagers generally awoke at dawn. Unlike the larger cities, they didn't have magically maintained continental light, so they rose and slept with the sun. Henry Emmett's mornings began with fetching water from the well near the house. Fetching water was women's work. Of course, the whole sexist thing. Her first chore was done when the large pot in her house was full. By that time, her mother would be finished preparing breakfast, and the 4 members of their family would sit down together to eat. Breakfast was barley and wheat oatmeal, sautéed vegetables, and on some days, dried fish. After that, she would go out to work in the fields with her mother and father. Her younger sister, soon to be 10, would gather wood near where the forest started or help in the fields. The bell in the center of town on the edge of the village square rang at noon. They would take a break from their work and eat lunch. Lunch was brown bread, baked some days earlier, and soup with bits of preserved meat in it. Then it was back to the fields. When the sky began to redden, they would return home and eat dinner. Dinner was the same brown bread as lunch, and bean soup. If a hunter caught an animal, they would sometimes get a share of the meat. After the meal, they would chat as a family and mend clothes by what light remained in the kitchen. They usually slept around 6 p.m. Henry Emmett had lived her whole life, from the moment she was born to her current age of 16 years, as a member of the village. She thought her uneventful life would continue on the same way forever. One day, Henry woke as usual and went to fetch water. She hauled the bucket out of the well and filled her small pot. It took about 3 trips to fill the large one at home. Oh. Huh? My phone rang. What? She rolled up her sleeves. The parts of her shirt that weren't tanned, or skin that weren't tanned, were glaringly white. Her arms were slender, but well toned from working in the fields. She even had some muscle. Oh, it was a spam risk thing. Okay. I was like, wait, who called my phone? The pot was quite heavy once it was full of water, but she picked it up like usual. If I had a pot one size bigger, maybe I could reduce my number of trips. Oh, but I probably wouldn't be able to carry it. That is true. Henry was about to head home when she thought she heard something and looked in the direction it came from. Something set the air rolling and her heart frothing. Off in the distance, she heard the sound of something wooden being crushed, and then a scream. It was like the cry of a bird having its neck wrung, and yet altogether different. That's a disturbing image. Well, I guess it could get worse, considering what happens in Season 3. Those weird freaking creatures that sound like goats. Something cold raced down Henry's spine. No way. It's just my imagination. I misheard. Words to drown out her anxiety bubbled up, popped, and disappeared. Panicking, she started to run. The scream had come from the distant direction of her house. She abandoned her pot. It's too heavy to run with. Her feet got tangled in her long skirt and she nearly tripped, but luckily she managed to keep her balance and run on. More voices. Henry's heart was pounding. Human screams, no doubt about it. Run, run, run. She couldn't remember ever having run this fast. She felt like she was going to trip over her own feet. Horses whinnying, people screaming, shouts. It was all getting louder. Still quite a ways away, but Henry saw an armored figure swinging a sword at a villager. The villager screamed and crumpled to the ground. The sword followed up with a finishing stab. Mr. Morger! There was no one in this small village she didn't know. They were all like family. So of course she knew the man who had been killed. He could be a bit loud at times, but he was a good-natured man. A good-natured person. He certainly didn't deserve to die like that. Henry nearly stopped in her tracks, but she gritted her teeth and pushed herself to sprint even faster. The distance never felt terribly long when she was carrying water, but now it seemed like she would never arrive. Angry shouts and curses reached her ears on the wind. Finally, her house was in sight. Mom! Dad! Nemu? Nemu? She called out to her family as she opened the door. Their three familiar faces were frightened, but all present, huddled together. As soon as she burst in, their expressions softened into relief. Henry, you're safe. She felt her father's rough farmer hands on her back as he hugged her, and the warm hands of her mother. Okay, now that Henry's here, let's get out of here. The Emmett family was in a pretty bad position. They didn't want Henry to come home to an empty house. So they missed their opportunity to escape. The danger must already be closing in. That fear soon became reality. As the four of them were just about to make a run for it, a shadow appeared at the front entryway. Standing there with the sun at his back was a knight in full armor. The arms of the Baharuth Empire emblazoned on his breastplate. In his hand was a naked blade, a longsword. The Baharuth Empire occasionally invaded its neighbor, the DxD's kingdom, but usually the fighting was centered around the fortress city of Irantel. The enemy had never made it as far as Khan, but now the village's peace had been shattered. From the icy stare coming through the gap in the closed helmet, Henry could sense that they were being counted. She hated the feeling of his eyes moving over them. A squeak from his metal gauntlet announced that he had tightened his grip on the sword. He moved into the house. Okay, I'm not making weird noises. Henry's father tackled the knight, and the pair of them tumbled out the front door. Go! Hurry! You bastard! Her father's face was lightly smeared with blood. He must have cut himself when he rushed the knight. The two of them thrashed around on the ground, her father struggling to keep the knight's dagger at bay, the knight struggling to keep her father's knife at bay. So essentially, it's a knife fight. Seeing a family member's blood right before her eyes made Henry's mind go completely blank. Should I try to help him or escape? Henry, Nemu, Nemu, however you pronounce it, guys. I am sorry, I am butchering some of these names and places. The shout brought her back to reality. Her mother, though anguished, was shaking her head. Henry took her sister's hand and started to run. Hesitation and guilt made her reluctant, but she had to just run as fast as she could to the forest. The whinnies and screams of horses, angry voices and the clanging of metal, and the smell of something burning. From all over the village, the sensations bombarded her eyes, ears, and nose. Where is that coming from? She was frantic to know more, even as she ran. In open areas, she moved in a half-crouch, trying to stay in the shadows of houses. Fear that made her blood run cold. The exertion of running wasn't the only reason her heart was pounding. The only thing keeping her moving was the little hand clasped in hers. My sister's life. Her mother, running a few paces ahead, was just turning a corner when she suddenly stiffened and shrank back. She boasted with the hand behind her to run the other way. When Henry realized why, she bit her lip to hold back a sob. She squeezed her sister's hand and ran to get as far away as she could. She didn't want to see what was going to happen next. Which I'm assuming is her mother trying to buy them time by engaging with the knights. And by that, I mean, getting killed. Okay, here we go. We're getting back to a manga on this one. Oh dear. How much is this one? Hang on. Dang it, I don't even know how much. Oh my god, I don't think I can read all this. No. I don't know how much I can read. Let me actually check real quick. I've been reading for... Oh, come on. Let's continue. Is something wrong, Lord of Manga? Albedo repeated her question. Manga wasn't sure how to answer. This series of mysterious events had short-circuited his brain. Please excuse me. Momonga gazed at her absent-mindedly as she got up and came up close to him. Is something the matter? She leaned in with her beautiful face. A faint but wonderful scent tickled Momonga's nostrils. Perhaps kick-started by the fragrance, his thoughts began to return to him. No, I'm all right. Thank you. It's nothing. He lacked the particular naivete required to speak too terribly polite towards a mannequin, but as soon as she had spoken to him, he felt compelled to answer. There was something undeniably human about the way she spoke and moved. The situation he and Alberto were in, I cannot talk today. The situation he and Alberto were in was way off, but he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Well, the fact that she is supposed to be an NPC and she's now talking and moving of her own accord should be a big red flag right there. He did his utmost to suppress the confusion and amazement that such a vague understanding generated, but he was just a normal guy. It didn't seem possible. Right as he was about to scream, he remembered the words of one of his guildmates. Panic breeds failure. One must always have a composed, rational state of mind. Calm your heart and broaden your outlook. Don't let your thoughts take you prisoner. Keep your mind quick, Momonga. With that remembrance, his calm came flooding back to him. He mentally gave his thanks to the man known as the guild's Kongming. What the heck is a Kongming? Let me know, please. Squishy Mo. Weird. Are you alright? Alberto asked, awfully close to him. She tilted her head adorably and leaned in so far that their breasts were overlapping. With this gorgeous girl in his face, the calm Momonga just regained, threatened to fly straight back out the window. The GM call isn't working. Swallowed up by Alberto's glistening pupils, he found himself consulting with an NPC. A member of the opposite sex had never approached Momonga with this look in her eyes before, especially with such a lack of propriety. He knew it was just an NPC someone had made, but the flow of her expression was so natural it was unsettling. How can he not realize that this is not an NPC anymore? But somehow he noticed these feelings settling down already as if they were being held back. The lack of wider emotional fluctuation, however, gave him a touch of anxiety. He had thought it was due to his former mate's words, but is that really it? More than likely because you are now a Overlord Lich that has no emotions, so thus any emotions you have are going to be kept in check. Momonga shook his head. Now wasn't the time. Please forgive me, I am so ignorant. I fear I am unable to answer your question regarding this GM call you speak of, quote-unquote. Nothing will make me happier than a chance to clear myself of the disgrace of failing your expectations. Your wish is my command. We're having a conversation. No doubt about it. The realization assaulted his entire body with a petrifying amazement. Impossible. This can't be happening. An NPC was talking. Well, there were macros that allowed them to do that. Players had been passing around data for battle cries and cheers, etc. Still, conversation was impossible. Even just a minute ago, Sebas and the maids wouldn't respond to anything that wasn't a simple command phrase. So how is this happening? Is Alberto just special? He motioned for her to step back and glimpsed a flicker of reluctance as he looked away to Sebas and the maids, who still had their heads bowed. Sebas, maids. My lord, they answered in magnificent unison, raising their heads in a slick motion. Come to the foot of the throne. Yes, sir. Their voices aligned again, and they sprang to their feet. The group walked together with beautiful posture at the bottom of the steps, leading to the throne before each dropping again to one knee and bowing. From this exchange, Momonga learned two things. First, although he had purposely avoided using command phrases, they could understand his intentions and carry them out. Second, Alberto was not the only one who could talk. At the very least, something weird was going on with all the NPCs in the throne room. As he was reflecting on these things, he had the same feeling as before that something was off about both Alberto and himself. Wanting to understand it, he scrutinized her. Is everything all right? Have I done something wrong? When he recognized the root of the incongruity, a sound that was neither word, gasp, nor choking noise escaped his lips. It was the changing expression. Her lips were moving, and he could hear her words. Flustered, he brought his fingers to his own lips and spoke. My jaw is moving. In the word of a DMMO RPG, that went against all common sense. Mouths moving and words coming out. Expression graphics were fixed, they didn't move. Otherwise, why would the developers have made emoticons? Plus, Momonga's face was a skull. He didn't have a tongue or a throat. Looking down at his hands, there was no flesh, and the bones weren't even anatomically correct. Which is weird. Continuing along the same lines, he probably didn't have any internal organs, not to mention lungs, so how could he talk? Impossible. He felt the internal logic he had built up slowly over time begin to crumble away, and equivalent panic replace it. He wanted to scream, but held it in. As expected, the beat in his chest was abruptly soothed by a wave of calm. The heat in his chest was abruptly soothed by a wave of calm. Umunga pounded the throne's armrest as he thought the number showing damage didn't pop up. What should I do? What makes the most sense? He was in an incomprehensible situation, but venting wouldn't get him anywhere. First, he needed information. Sebas. The expression on Sebas' face as he lifted his head was earnestness incarnate. He looked like he was really alive. I can give him an order, right? I'm not sure what's going on, but I can assume the NPCs in the Tomb of the Tomb are loyal to me, right? Actually, I don't even know if these are our NPCs. Countless questions and the anxiety that went with them arose in his mind, but Umunga tuned it all out. In any case, there was no one better to send out for reconnaissance than Sebas. He did glance momentarily at Alberto, who was waiting off to the side, but he made up his mind to give the order to Sebas. He imagined what executives at work were like when directing regular employees and tried to act like he was one of them. Leave the tomb and confirm our surroundings within a half-mile radius. If there's any intelligent life forms, negotiate to bring them here on amicable terms. You can give them practically whatever they request in return. Avoid combat to the extent possible. I understood, Lord Umunga. I will leave without delay. In Yggdrasil, it was definitely not possible to take NPCs who were built to protect the base and send them outside, but here it was. Well, I won't know for sure until he actually makes it outside, but take one member of the Pallades with you. If you're attacked, have her retreat immediately to bring back any information you have. With that, Umunga had made at least one move. He let go of the staff of Iron Zolgone. It didn't clatter to the ground, but instead hung in the air as if somebody was holding it. It was against the laws of physics, but it was just like the game. In Yggdrasil, it wasn't uncommon for items to float in the air when one let go of them. The staff's aura was anguished faces twisted around his hand as if reluctant to dissipate. Umunga calmly ignored it. Now that he was used to it. But that sort of macro wasn't so strange. He shook his wrist to get rid of it. Crossing his arms, he thought what his next move should be. I suppose I need to contact the admins. The administration was sure to be the most informed of anyone about this abnormal abnormal situation. The problem was how to reach them. Usually a shout or GM call would work, but if they didn't now, a message maybe? There was one magic spell that was a way to contact people. It could only be used in specific places and situations, but it seemed like it would be effective now. The only problem was that it was usually used to communicate between players. He wasn't sure if it would work to contact the GM. He didn't even have any guarantee that magic in general would work normally in this crisis. But he had to find out. Umunga was a level 100 magic user. If he couldn't use magic, his area of operations and information gathering powers would be severely limited, not to mention his combat strength. Right now, he had no idea what the situation was, so he needed to confirm it as soon as possible whether or not he can use magic. Because if he can't use magic, he's essentially screwed. In that case, I need to go somewhere I can test it out. He looked out over the throne room and shook his head. This was an emergency, but he didn't want to disturb this room's sublime tranquility for magic experiments. But then where? He thought and came up with an ideal location. It was also necessary to test out the extent of his influence. He had to see whether he had maintained his authority as guildmaster. So far, everyone he had met was loyal to him, but there were several NPCs in the Great Tomb of Nazarick at his level. He needed to make sure the rest of them were still loyal too. But he looked down at Sebas and the maids, who were still on one knee, and then at Alberto beside him. What is it? Her faint smile seemed to say. She was beautiful, but the shadows cast by her horns made it seem like something was hidden behind her smile. It made Umunga nervous. And the loyalty they have now is the loyalty they have now invaluable and unchanging. In the real world, a boss who makes stupid moves all the time loses support. Does it work the same way here, or is it once faithful, always faithful? If I suppose our loyalty could change, how do I maintain it? By giving them rewards? The treasury contained vast riches. It would pain him to lay a hand on the items his former guildmates had left, but if it was to keep Ainzel going through this crisis, they would forgive him, wouldn't they? And then, of course, he didn't have any idea how much he should pay, or displaying the excellence you'd expect of a ruler. What constituted excellence, however, was unclear. He had the feeling things would work out if he just kept maintaining this dungeon. Or maybe through power? The staff of Einzelgone flew automatically into his outstretched hand. Overwhelming power. The staff's 7 jewels began to sparkle as if appealing for their vast magical powers to be used. Well, I guess I'll think about it later. He let go of the staff. It swayed in the air for a moment and then clattered to the floor like someone going to bed in a huff. Anyhow, it seemed as if he had acted like he was... It seemed like if he acted like he was in charge, he was unlikely to meet hostility anytime soon. It's hard for animals to turn their fangs on one who doesn't show any weaknesses, and the same thing went for humans. Umunga raised his voice. Pleiades, all of you besides the one going with Sebas, go up to the 9th level and be on the lookout for any raiders coming down from 8. Yes, Lord Umunga. The maids behind Sebas complied. Now go immediately. Understood, Lord and Master. Their voices echoed. Sebas and the combat maids all paid their respects to Umunga, stood at once, and set off. The huge door opened, then closed after them. I'm so glad they didn't say no or something. Relieved, he looked to the last remaining NPC, Albedo, who was still waiting beside him. Now then, Lord Umunga, what may I do for you? She asked with a gentle smile. Oh, right. Umunga leaned out of the throne to pick up a staff. Come here. Yes, sir. She sounded overjoyed and sidled right up. Umunga worried about her wand and the black sphere floating on the end of it for just a moment, but decided to forget about it. She was closer than last time, all but clinging to him. She smells so good. But what am I thinking? A thought popped up again, but he promptly dismissed it. He didn't have time for that sort of nonsense now. Umunga reached out and touched her hand. The look on Albedo's face said she was in pain. He whipped his hand away as if he'd been electrocuted. Wonder what's wrong. Did I creep her out? Mixed in with the numerous and memories, like having cashiers drop change into his hand from above to avoid accidentally touching him, flitted across his mind. He found the answer. Oh. An Overlord was a higher rank of Elder Lich, and one of the special abilities an Elder Lich could acquire by leveling up was the dealing of damage by touch, normally as an attack. Maybe that's it? But even if that was the case, there was still questions remaining. In Yggdrasil, the system would judge mobs and NPCs within the Great Tomb of Nazarick as belonging to Einzelgone. Friendly fire for guild members was always off, so allies couldn't harm one another. So did that mean she didn't belong to the guild, or that friendly fire had been turned on? The latter is a distinct possibility, Umunga decided, and said to Albedo, Sorry, I forgot to turn off negative touch. Never you mind, little Umunga, that level of damage wasn't even damage. Besides, I would suffer any oh god. Really, Albedo, you are just too much. I would suffer any agony for you. I see. But I'm sorry. Umunga stammered, not knowing how to act towards Albedo as she made that cute little shriek and covered her blushing cheeks with her hands. But it did seem like the issue had been damage from negative touch. Averting his eyes from Albedo, who was going on about a virgin's... Oh god, no. About a virgin... Yeah, it actually confirmed right there. If that's actually confirmation, or maybe she's just comparing it to a virgin's pain. If she's just comparing it, then no. But if that's not it, then she just confirmed that she actually is a virgin. Umunga tried to think of how to temporarily turn off a passive power, and suddenly it dawned on him. Using any of an Overlord's various powers was now as natural as an act of breathing. He found himself laughing in spite of himself at what an extraordinary situation he was in. After all the strange things that had happened so far, it didn't even surprise him. Adaptability is a terrifying thing. I'm going to touch you. Oh! After turning off the ability, he reached out and touched her hand. Countless thoughts came up, how delicate it was, how white, but Umunga dismissed any of that stemmed from his being male. What he wanted to know was if she had a pulse. She does. The beat was a steady ba-boom, ba-boom. It would only be natural for a living thing. Wait, yeah, for a living thing. Umunga took his hand away and looked at his own wrist. There was no skin, flesh, or anything, besides pure white bone. He had no blood vessels, so of course he had no pulse. That's right. An Overlord was undead, a being who had transcended death. Of course he wouldn't have a pulse. He looked up at Albedo. He could see himself in her glistening pupils. Her cheeks were awfully flushed. Her body temperature was probably skyrocketing. Noting these changes in her that was enough to shake him up. What's going on? It's an NPC, just some data, right? What kind of AI can make data look like it's actually alive? It's practically as if Yggdrasil has become reality. That's impossible. Umunga shook his head. It can't be anything as crazy as that. And once the idea had lodged in his mind, it wouldn't come unstuck so easily. Feeling vaguely uncomfortable about the changes he was noticing in Albedo, he hesitated about what to do next. His next move would be his last. If I check this last thing, all my hunches will turn to convictions. The balance in that shows whether this is reality or not. Will swing one way or the other, so I have to do it. I wouldn't be surprised if she attacked me with that weapon she's holding, but even so. Albedo. Can I touch your chest? Huh? The atmosphere froze solid. Albedo blinked, bewildered. The moment he said it, Umunga felt he might die of embarrassment. I wouldn't blame him. Sure, he had no choice, but what kind of thing was that to say to a lady? He had the urge to howl that he was the worst person in existence. I've abused my power in order to sexually harass a woman. I really am the worst, but I can't help it. It has to be done. He forcefully talked himself down and regained his mental equilibrium rather quickly, then mustered all of his coercive power as a superior. You don't... Oh my god. He meowed. You don't, mind, do you? Utter failure. His timid words caused Albedo to beam as if she were the sun making all the flowers bloom. Of course, Umunga, please have your way. Just saying all this is just weird. Oh my god, I can't wait till I get to darkness. Oh dear lord. She puffed out her chest. Her substantial breasts were thrust into Umunga's face. If he had the ability to gulp, he would have surely done so several times. Her breasts were giving her dress great lift, and he was about to touch them. On the one hand, Umunga was feeling oddly nervous and shaken, but some corner of his brain was being calmed and objectively self-observant. Hang on, let me move my mouse. He started to feel incredibly stupid. Why is this the test I thought of, and why am I actually doing it? Good question. For some reason, when he peeked at Albedo, she stuck her chest out even more, as if to say, go ahead, her eyes twinkling. Was Umunga aroused or ashamed? Was Umunga aroused or ashamed? He willed his hand to stop shaking, made up his mind, and reached out. Under the dress, he felt something a bit rigid, but beneath that, he could feel something soft. I'm guessing he felt that there was a bra or something? Oh god, I'm not reading that. No, you can't make me. You can't make me. Amid Albedo's sticky moaning, Umunga got the information he was after. Assuming he was still sane, Umunga had two hypotheses for explaining the current situation. One was the possibility of a new DMMO RPG. In other words, all the same stuff Yggdrasil had shut down. At the same time Yggdrasil had shut down, Yggdrasil 2 had started up. But that didn't seem terribly plausible after what he'd just experienced. In Yggdrasil, doing anything rated R was strictly forbidden. Even PG-13 should be considered out of line in some cases. Violators were dealt with severely. Their names were posted to the list of abusers on the game's website, and their accounts were suspended. That's because if a log of it were made public, the operation would find themselves afraid of the foul of the adult entertainment business laws. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't have surprised Umunga if what he had just done had been against the rules. If he was still in game world. There should have been some measure in place to prevent it. In the first place, if the GM and admins were monitoring, they would have tried to stop him, but there was no sign of that. Additionally, the cybertech laws that govern DMMO RPGs viewed forcible, non-consensual participation in a game as kidnapping for ransom. If someone were forced to be a test player, it would be immediately exposed. The inability to force quit would probably be seen as illegal confinement too. If that was what was going on, the game's proprietary console had to keep a week's worth of records by law. So exposing it would be easy enough. When he didn't show up for work, someone would probably come over to check on him, and once the police investigated the console, that would clear things up. But was there really a conspiracy, a company stupid enough to commit a crime so easy to get caught for in an organization-wide way? Of course, if they said it's an early demo version of Yggdrasil 2, or we just released a patch, there was a gray sum, but he couldn't believe it would be worth it to the developers or admins to take that kind of risk. So there had to be something at work besides the developer's intentions. In that case, he needed to make a fundamental change in the way he was thinking, or he wouldn't get anywhere. The problem was that how he should think was unclear. There was only one other possibility: that the fantasy world had become the real world. Possible. He probably rejected the idea. There was no way something that was so outrageous, so illogical could be true. On the other hand, the longer this went on, the more he wondered it might actually be the case. He remembered the fragrance coming off Albedo earlier. The sense of taste and smell were altogether banned from Fantasy World by the cybertech laws. Yggdrasil had a system for eating and drinking, but anything players consumed only affected their in-game stats. Even touch was regulated to some extent. This was all so that the game couldn't be mistaken for the real world. As a result, all of the limitations Fantasy World featuring sex hadn't really caught on. But here he could smell. The reality of that hit among us so hard it completely blew away all of his, oh, what about work tomorrow? And what if I can't get out of here type of worries. If this weren't reality, just in terms of the bandwidth that would be required to run this fantasy, it would be impossible. His mouth was bone dry, but he swallowed anyway. Even if he couldn't understand it, his mind had already accepted it. Finally, he let his hand fall limp from Albedo's full chest. He felt that he had been groping her a bit longer than necessary, but he told himself it was something he had to do for confirmation. It certainly wasn't because she was so soft he couldn't take his hand away. At least, probably not. Sorry, Albedo. Okay, I don't know why, but for some reason my nose is getting stopped up from doing this. She exhaled hotly, and he could feel why her cheeks had turned so red. Then she said, looking slightly askance. Askance? What the heck is that word? So here it is. Oh God. Yes, this confirms it. She admits in the first volume that she is a virgin. Hang on. Hello? Whatever. Here it is, my first time. Huh? Amunga let out a confused yelp in spite of himself. It took him a moment to understand what she was saying. First time? For what? And what's with that look on her face? What shall I do with my clothes? What? Would you like me to take them off myself? Or did you want to do it? If I keep them on, they might get dirty. Oh, but if my lord prefers it that way, I have no objections. Finally, her words sank in. Actually, Amunga wondered if he even had any brain left for that to sneak into. Once he understood where all this was coming from, it grated on him. Stop it, Albedo. Yes, sir? Right now we can't. We don't have time to be doing such things. My humble apologies. I shouldn't have prioritized desire. We're having some sort of emergency. She jumped away from him and went to prostrate herself, but Amunga put out one hand to stop her. You're fine. It was my fault. All is forgiven, Albedo. More importantly, I have orders for you. Anything you wish, my lord. Contact the floor guardians and tell them to gather at the amphitheater in the 6th level 1 hour from now. I will let correct me if I'm mispronouncing this. Azra and Mari know myself, so there's no need to contact them. Understood. To repeat, you would like me to contact all the floor guardians besides those of the 6th level and tell them to meet in the 6th level's amphitheater 1 hour from now. Right, now go. My lord, Albedo turned to leave the throne room with slightly quickened steps. Watching her go, Amunga heaved a tired sigh, and once she had left, he let out an agonized moan. What the hell? It was a stupid joke. If I'd have known this would happen, I wouldn't have done it. Have I defiled the NPC that Tabula created? He could think of only one reason Albedo would react to him in that way. The text he edited into her bio, and she's in love with Amunga. It had to be connected to that. Ah, crap, he groaned. Yep. If you would, then again, you did not know that this was all going to happen, so. Tabular Smargadita, whatever. had put his all into filling that blank canvas without Battle's backstory. Then Munga condescendingly painted over it for his own selfish reasons. Now this was the result. It felt like he'd vandalized a masterpiece. You didn't know that all this was going to happen. You figured, oh, it's just a joke. The game is going to shut down anyway. It doesn't matter. And it wouldn't have mattered. But he had to put that issue aside for now. Still wincing, though it wasn't obvious, given that his face was a skull, he stood up from the throne. He told himself he could figure that problem out after taking care of the more urgent tasks. There's, I think it was, Aura? Is how you pronounced it? I could be wrong. Okay, we're getting to chapter 2, guys, but I'm not starting that now. I will be starting that next time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you all next time.